So my father was a photographer, and he had because he was a teacher and we didn't have a lot of money, he started taking wedding photos. And I started going with him then and moved on to different things, as you can tell from my work. I started taking street art when we were in London many years ago, and I stumbled on Banksy. And I just loved the sense of humor and the political aspects of his work. So after that, I started paying more attention to what was going on around me and was able to discover more artists and more different expressions of work. And it's easy with the camera. You can just stick it in your purse or your bag or whip out your phone.
I started to do photography a really long time ago, back in the 80s when I was still in school, and I actually majored in photojournalism in the 90s. And I didn't start this series until 2005, and so it was a few years after I moved to DC, and I kind of got out of touch with photography. I wasn't inspired, so I didn't know what to do, and I just, for the heck of it, took my Holga camera out. And that's what I use for this series. And I started making pictures, and I started deliberately overlapping the images in the camera, just to do something different.
I started when I was very young. I was a painter and a printmaker. I started ceramics, which is what you're seeing here, in the early 90s. So that's been about 25 years. I did etchings and I did paintings until I got to Washington, D.C. when I began to do ceramics, and I have stuck with it since then.
I did some drawings and stuff when I was younger. I liked doing a lot, and but then when I was a teenager, I started picking it back up. I met some people that encouraged me and said I was really good at art, and I didn't think so. I didn't really care about art that much. I was into skateboarding a lot, and then they sort of opened up my eyes, like maybe I can do this, and then started doodling, doing some drawings for fun, and then saw a video about Jean-Michel Basquiat, however you say that, and then I realized maybe I could go paint, do big paintings. So then I kind of kept going, and then I went through some phases, and when I was 21 or 22, then I started really diligently doing detailed work on larger pieces. So there's like some pretty big gap, like increments of time that go in between some of those, but so yeah.
Because I photograph other people's work, I don't really want to just like be a Xerox machine and copy it. So when I go through and look at this stuff, I try really hard to pick out elements of it or details and create my own art, if you will, based on theirs. So it's sort of an interpretation of what they've already created. And I include a lot of dumpsters, people who are walking by, a lot of weeds or grass or the sky or parts of the building itself. A lot of it just depends on where it's at. You can tell when I'm taking a photograph of something that's in a back alley because there's usually at least 3 dumpsters in the picture, which adds some color. We started traveling internationally about 4 years ago, so I've got a lot of photos from places in Reykjavik in Iceland, which is kind of totally crazy stuff. And then we visited friends in Cape Town in South Africa, and that's a whole nother style and a whole nother focus, if you will. And then some in Lisbon and Morocco, which was our latest trip. And then a lot of stuff in the United States based on some of the places we've gone because of my husband's work or travels that we've got for visiting family. And they're all different. And that's the best part for me, at least, because I'm a big walker, so is the rest of my family. So when we go someplace, we have like 3 places we want to see, and then after that it's just roaming around. So when I'm roaming around, sometimes it's kind of fun to create this sort of scavenger hunt for things that are in places you wouldn't normally go to. So you can find some amazing places that are very interesting or a little edgy or like, I will never go back there again in my life, but there's always something right around the corner. Some of them are huge. I've got some pictures here that are just small bits and pieces or details of a much larger building. Someone was just describing her as a Mona Lisa, which is a 3-story building, and that's great. But I also love the tiny little stuff that you find on fire hydrants and telephone poles and doors, or in broken windows. There'll be a little thing in the corner. So it's kind of all over the place. And sometimes there's graffiti within the graffiti, which is even more fun. because it's like, oh, this second message of whatever it was that was going on. I like things that are a little off bubble. There are some murals that you see and people really admire, but to me they're a little too sweet or nice, and I find them uninteresting. So when I go and try to, when I go and look for work or try to take a photograph of it and interpret it, I try to create something that's a little edgier, makes kind of a statement. So sometimes it's hard because you've got what you have to work with, but I like stuff that is not necessarily pretty, but attractive to look at from either a composition standpoint or a color or a topic. Or there's just a great story behind it. I mean, that's part of the fun too.
It's not any one thing, so that's the first thing to consider, is that you're not looking for one perfect thing. You're looking for elements that'll work well together. So trying to keep your images to maybe one busy element, and then everything else, you know, either simple, geometric, a texture to overlap. It's really about balance. And so I've done this treatment with people as well, so portraits. It's the same thing. You want to have the person, and then you maybe find a texture or a geometric element, something to overlap it. But you want to make sure you have a focus at all times. So it gets challenging when you're overlapping on the fly, but keeping in mind light and dark and texture and shape, and to have everything flow together. This definitely works best outside. I do have lights that I can attach to this camera, but that involves a huge setup, and it's not nearly as spontaneous as if I can just go out and shoot. So if I can use natural light, that's usually more fun for walking around. I can't just go inside and start shooting. I have to have a flash because this camera doesn't have controls like some other cameras. So I have to find my conditions or make my conditions, and it's most of what I have here is actually just outside as I'm walking around, and definitely urban. That's where you find the most textures and variety, I guess. If you're out in the woods, you're going to shoot a lot of nature, but I don't think this quite works as well with that type of environment.
It's mostly all constructed pieces that I do. In other words, they are put together like carpentry. It's called slab building. I am very much someone who is interested in writing. So all these things are exemplars of the imagery that writing, whatever the writing is, brings to you. Some of the work at the back has Japanese writing on it, and you can't read it, but the visual aspect of writing is what I'm interested in. Therefore, the meaning that you're giving is not the literal meaning that the writing has, it's the visual meaning. Americans mostly don't read Japanese. This is cuneiform. Writing is very interesting, just as the marks of the hand, the cave paintings, you know, what you do with your hand, and its visual power. The interpretive power comes afterwards, but it's what you mean, what you make of it. So in other words, I like writing as something that is known as asemic, without the immediate semantic content, with an asemic or asemantic content, which is all the imagination brings to it.
Sometimes when I first started, I start from scratch. So with paintings like these ones with the lines, usually I'll maybe sometimes see the color in my head, or I'll be doodling and I'll see, actually sometimes like I'll have 3 markers laying next to each other and there'll be 3 good colors. And for some reason I think 3 is a really strong number. If you can get 3 colors to match and outline them in black, then you have a good set of colors. It's good something to work with there. And I started one of those pieces like that, and it turned out really nice. And then so it just added red, white, and black, where I thought that would be good. Maybe just leave the center white. I did red, white, and blue, kind of like the American color, or blue, white, red is like the France flag. So then I just go from there, really. If it's just like I'll think it looks good, so I'll try it. Just pretty much what happens. I'm heavily influenced by graffiti. I don't do a lot of graffiti myself, but I'm heavily influenced by it, so I'm a big fan. So, and I'm kind of a night owl, so I like being able to quietly, when I use a lot of supplies from graffiti sites, like Art Primo or Bombing Signs, these Molotov markers, so it's kind of related a little bit to that sort of setting. They fit nicely in that setting. And I love buildings, I don't know why. So I love drawing buildings, but I love video games too, so I'll implement video games. So I have like this weird, probably mesh of like video games and graffiti and then abstract art. If we could take those three things, that would probably, not just those three, but yeah, something like that, you know, I guess. Not to break it down too much, but I love cartoons. Love animation and all that, yeah. I love just creative, anything that's creative I think is great, you know. I've been skateboarding for many years. So I think that there's something when you're skateboarding, you know, it's almost like when you're younger, it's kind of like destroy, and there's a spontaneity that has to happen when you skate. You kind of know what you're doing, but it's always a little different, and you're never sure you're going to land. So with the painting, there's some of that. Even though some of these take a lot of time, none of them are really pre-planned. Only every once in a while do I have an idea, except for the color itself. Once I start doing it, if it looks good, we'll stick with that color. But then we just go everywhere. We kind of just go everywhere. It's kind of funny because these are kind of in the lines, and then some of them, other paintings, you can tell they're still wild. There has to be something wild. It can't just stay stagnant. You know, it has to be fun. I keep going note by note, really. So I keep getting invited to different shows, and I really like that. You know, it feels good just to paint in general. So I don't know about long-term future. I really don't know, but I hope that I can just keep going and selling them and stuff. And you know, it's reassuring sometimes when you sell them. It's nice. Someone wants to buy them, and then they have them. And now I'm working on one for someone in France. So someone in France is going to have one. They want one, and you know, so that's cool. You know, so maybe just keep doing that, I guess.